But I do want to tell you about some science today. Okay, so don't go away. It's going to be a quick science. So the question that people that these researchers were asking, and this is a new study that just got published in the Journal of Sex Research, was how people remember whether their first sexual intercourse was mutually consensual or not. And they actually used about 600 people that were all born in the same year in Dunedin, which is a town in New Zealand, and they were all born the same year in 1972. And they asked them the exact same question when they were 21 years old, and then again when they were 38 years old. And they asked them, would you say that you were both equally willing to have intercourse the first time that you had intercourse, or was one of you more willing than the other? And the options were, we were both equally willing, I was more willing than my partner was more willing than me, and I can't remember. So they asked that exact same question when people were 21, and then 17 years later when people were 38. Yeah, so this was specifically about intercourse, not other types of sex. So their first sort of sexual intercourse. And there was a very different percentage of people saying whether it was mutually willing or not mutually willing. So when yes, and yes. So here is the results. So as you can see, men at both ages were more likely to say that their first intercourse was mutually willing, 77% when they were age 21, compared to 53% of women when they were 21. But 17 years later, in both sexes, almost 20% more people said that they had a mutually willing, mutually consensual first intercourse. So the numbers shot up in both sexes as to, whether it was mutually consensual. Still, women were lower than men. But yeah, exactly. So what do you think about this? How memories become rosy, right? So waiting is better for them. Well, no, this isn't about waiting. These are the same people. These are the exact same people who were asked the same question when they were 21 and when they were 38. So this is showing how memories change and how our interpretation of what happened is very different, maybe a couple of years ago and then 20 years later, right? So a lot of people, there was about 20% of people who initially, soon after they had their first intercourse, they didn't quite think that it was mutually consensual. They thought one of the person was more willing than the other. And usually for women, that was, their partner was much more willing than they were. And then 20 years later, they kind of changed their mind. They fell back on what is probably the more socially acceptable or socially desirable response, which is, it was mutually willing. Well, we don't know exactly what the reason was. It could be memory failing. It could be people not really trying to remember exactly what happened. It could be that, with the passage of time, this probably wasn't, for the most people, it wasn't, a serious kind of forced experience. It was just, somewhat of a difference in willingness.